After my death, 2 months later, my husband, Robert Johnson, brought his new wife, Emily, to stand before my grave. They gazed down at the elderly couple below, leaning against each other for support. For some inexplicable reason, I felt an urge to laugh. In the solemn atmosphere of the cemetery, the two of them were dressed in bright red wedding attire. Despite both being in their 80s, they looked remarkably energetic. After burning the paper offerings, Robert sincerely patted Emily's delicate hand resting on his arm, signaling her to stay calm. If it hadn't been for the so-called repayment of your family's favor back then, how would I have been separated from Emily for 60 years? No matter how much you clung to me, what did Emily ever do wrong? We were married for 60 years. You should be content with that. He raised his eyes to the photograph on my tombstone, his cloudy gaze filled with coldness and resentment. It was the same look he had given me for the past 60 years whenever he bothered to glance at me. I had been Robert's lawful wife for nearly 70 years, while the woman beside him, Emily Carter, had been his first love, the one he considered his white moonlight, occupying his heart for just as long. I knew of her existence even before we married. Back then, Robert had casually referred to her as the girl next door. Only after we got married, as he grew increasingly dissatisfied with me, and their interactions became more blatant, did I understand the truth about their relationship. For over 60 years, Robert never truly looked at me because of this white moonlight. Now that I was finally dead, my funeral wasn't even finished. Yet this old man couldn't wait to bring her into our home as his wife. This was Robert Johnson, the man I had once sacrificed so much for, scrimping and saving to support his academic ambitions. He was now the renowned Professor Johnson. Robert paused, turning to the elegant older woman beside him. His gaze softened as he spoke. Now that we're finally together, I don't want to miss this chance again. Besides, Emily has long been mine. Today is our wedding day. If you have any grievances, direct them at me. Emily is innocent. The woman beside him interrupted urgently, her tone both tender and firm. What nonsense are you saying? You and I were always meant to be one. After so many years, don't you understand? Robert, I've always been willing to share every hardship and joy with you. Her soft but forceful words seemed to strike a chord with Robert. The two leaned closer together, as if comforting each other. If it weren't for their age and the sparse surroundings of my grave, who knows what indecent things they might have done. Such beautiful words. Where was she when he was penniless and struggling? I was the one who endured all the hardships. And now, the two of them get to enjoy their so-called joy together. I knew during my life that Robert still kept in touch with her, but I naively believed that, as a respected professor, he wouldn't stoop to immoral actions. How laughable my assumptions were. Watching Robert berate me in front of my grave, accusing me of being vengeful and ungrateful, I didn't know what to say. A burning rage surged in my chest, consuming me entirely. Finally, I could bear it no longer. Gathering all my fury, I screamed a single word. Leave! In that moment, my consciousness began to dissipate. I could no longer think or distinguish anything. Darkness engulfed me. Just before everything faded, I thought, if there is a next life, I swear I will never, ever be tied to this heartless, ungrateful, treacherous man again. Truly, scholars are often the most callous. A deafening crash jolted me back to my senses. The world around me slowly came into focus. Standing in the rain was a handsome young man, soaked to the bone, staring at me intently. I froze, confused, until I looked down at my own soft, pale hands clutching a ration coupon. Only then did I finally realize I had really been reborn, and it was on this very day, the day I had once lent Robert Johnson ration tickets for grain. Back in those days, during the political famine, people tried every possible way to get enough food to survive. Grain was more precious than gold, rice, wheat, and corn were treasures beyond measure. Some desperate families even gave away their children to wealthy households in exchange for food. One day, in a torrential downpour, I happened to run into Robert, who was wandering through the rain, desperately seeking grain. He was a scholar, with an air of elegance, a fair and delicate face, and a long robe that clung to his thin frame. Soaked through by the rain, he looked striking, and I found myself mesmerized. As if possessed, I waved him over and lent him 3 pounds of rice ration tickets. My family wasn't wealthy either. At home, there was an elderly relative bedridden with illness, and all our food came from my parents' tireless labor. Every grain of rice was hard-earned. Later, when the Johnson family couldn't repay the tickets, they offered to take care of me in the future. That's how I became Robert's wife. Now, the same scene replayed before my eyes. I hesitated. If I were to think carefully about it, my previous life had been filled with misfortune because of this man. My husband had been incapable, his family disrespectful, and even my son ungrateful. Every misstep of my life had started from the moment I lent Robert those 3 pounds of rice. This time, I wanted to see how Robert would survive this crisis without my help, and how he would explain it to his precious Emily. At this moment, Robert was looking at me expectantly. I could feel his gaze locked on the ration tickets in my hand. It wasn't intuition. It was the same expression my previous life's Robert had whenever he was scheming, like the little stray dog I had raised, trying to steal food with a guilty conscience. Remembering the life I had endured because of him, I tightened my grip on the tickets. When I looked at him again, I noticed a flicker of panic in his eyes, as if afraid I wouldn't lend them to him. He guessed correctly. I wouldn't. I shoved the ration tickets back into my pocket. "It's pouring rain out here," I said lightly. "Why don't you have an umbrella? Look at you, all skin and bones. You'd better be careful not to get washed away in the flood." Robert opened his mouth to speak, but I interrupted him. "Don't tell me your family's out of food already?" He froze for a moment before turning to look at me, his eyes dark and calculating. Before he could try any tricks, I cut him off again. "No way. The famine's only just started. How could your family already be out of food? I remember you have 2 older brothers, don't you? With so many grown men in your family, surely you saved something. And no umbrella? Your family must really be struggling." I pulled out a lotus leaf from my basket and handed it to him. "Here, use this for now. Go home quickly." Robert's fists clenched, then relaxed. He didn't even finish a sentence before I placed the green lotus leaf over his head. Without looking back, I slung my basket over my shoulder, opened my umbrella, and headed home. Once I turned my back, the smile on my face faded, replaced by simmering resentment. "Go home with that green leaf over your head, Robert, and explain yourself to your dear Emily," I muttered under my breath. After walking some distance, I turned back briefly, rain streaming down my umbrella. Robert stood there, his back straight and proud. His bearing didn't match that of a poor, desperate scholar without food or resources. No, he looked more like the Robert Johnson of the future, the esteemed professor. Could it be that he had been reborn too? I shook my head. Whatever. Let that old man be. I needed to get home first. As I walked along the familiar path etched into my memories, an overwhelming wave of emotion surged through me. My nose stung, and tears threatened to fall. My family was small and simple. My parents were hardworking and kind, and we also had an elderly relative bedridden at home. In my previous life, this was a happy time for my family, even though it was during the famine years. We had some savings, and life was manageable. But everything changed after Robert Johnson married me under the pretense of repaying a debt. My family's savings were quickly drained. Our elderly relative, already frail, couldn't eat enough to stay healthy and worried about me every day. Before long, they passed away. My parents, wanting me to have a better life, exhausted themselves supporting Robert's education. In the end, their health failed, and they both collapsed under the strain. Now that I've been given another chance, I will never let history repeat itself. When I got home, my father was still out working, but my mother rushed out as soon as she heard me. She grabbed the basket off my back and pulled me into the house. Inside, our elderly relative sat on a wooden couch, peering anxiously toward the door, looking at the familiar sights of our little courtyard. I felt an overwhelming warmth. This was truly my home. That evening, my mother cooked a simple meal of 3 dishes and a soup to reward my father and me. During dinner, I announced, "I want to study." My family turned to look at me in surprise. This decision wasn't made lightly. I had thought it through carefully. In my previous life, Robert wasn't particularly intelligent. Took him 3 tries to get into school. Later, He became a professor not because of any great talent, but because he learned how to flatter his superiors and play politics. I also knew that this famine would only last until next year. After that, life would improve, and the government would encourage education and cultural development. Those who started studying early would have the chance to rise and succeed. I wanted to seize this opportunity. If I could catch this wave, I could give my family a better life in the future. At the dinner table, my father was the first to speak. In my childhood, it was my elderly relative who taught me to read and understand moral principles, while my parents taught me practical lessons about life. In my previous life, though I didn't have much formal education, I wasn't completely ignorant. I had learned bit by bit from my family. If we're talking about the kind of academic knowledge needed for exams, I probably wasn't as good as other scholars, but I wasn't illiterate either. Plus, having lived a full life and absorbed everything I had learned from being by Robert's side, I believed I had an advantage this time. Who knows? This path might actually work out. My father found a teacher through a friend, and I started attending lessons. On my first day, as I prepared to head home after class, I stepped out the door and spotted Robert sitting under an old tree in the distance. His face was pale, and his thin frame looked as if it might collapse under the lightest breeze. He sat there, listless, like a frail shadow of a person. The evening wind tugged at the hem of his long robe, making him look even more pitiful. How infuriating! In my previous life, this was exactly how he tricked me into falling for him. I turned my head away, keeping my expression cold, and prepared to leave. But as I was about to walk away, I heard a faint sigh from him, barely audible. What was this? In my previous life, Robert was always eager to guide and teach me. What had changed now? Without his guidance, how was I supposed to move forward? A sinking feeling grew in my chest as I tightened my grip on the cloth-wrapped bundle in my hands. Since my rebirth, I had noticed that Robert seemed different. He wasn't as impatient or brash as the naive young man I once knew. Instead, there was a calculating calmness in his demeanor, as if he was always one step ahead, carefully orchestrating everything. It dawned on me, Robert Johnson had been reborn too. It was better to stay far away from him. I lifted my foot, ready to leave, but his voice called out to me, making my skin crawl. Wait. I rolled my eyes, annoyed. Who are you to stop me? Robert Johnson faltered, clearly not expecting such a blunt response. Then, as if something dawned on him, he turned his head to look at the building where Mr. Su was running his school. His gaze shifted back to me, and his expression filled with disbelief. What are you doing here? He asked, his tone accusatory. Studying. What else would I be doing? I saw his eyebrows slowly knit together, signaling his irritation. That expression reminded me so much of him in my previous life. During his years as a professor, he often looked at me like this, displeased and exasperated. You're a woman, he scoffed. What's the point of studying? You'd be better off finding someone to marry. That's what really matters. I couldn't stop myself from rolling my eyes again. My patience was wearing thin. What does it have to do with you? Why don't you mind your own business? And maybe take off that musty robe while you're at it. It reeks. What era are we in? Why are you still clinging to these pretentious scholarly airs? Robert's face went through a rainbow of emotions. Yellow, red, and finally green. Like a traffic light. It was so ridiculous I almost laughed out loud. Still, I decided to be the bigger person and let it slide. Just as I was about to walk away, his sharp tongue struck again. What tricks did you use to get Mr. Su to accept you? He looks for talent and character in his students. You don't have either. So how did you manage it? I laughed bitterly. So this was what he thought of me? After all these years, I was nothing more than a talentless, immoral woman in his eyes. In my past life, I had supported this man wholeheartedly, only to be repaid with disdain and belittlement. I turned back to him, my gaze icy and devoid of emotion. You said it yourself. Mr. Su values talent and character. So tell me, why would he take me and not you? His expression faltered, a flicker of embarrassment and anger crossing his face. Then he sneered, his voice dripping with malice. Oh, I get it. You must have used some special methods unique to women. You've never been an honest person, have you? Always so disgraceful. If people found out about your affair with him, Do you think they'd let you continue your studies? Or would they tear you apart with their gossip? I stared at him, stunned. For the first time, I realized I didn't know this man at all. His words were deliberate, meant to hurt and humiliate me in the cruelest way possible. In any era, rumors like this could ruin someone's life. He knew that too, yet he still said it. Here, in broad daylight. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Slowly, I set down the items I was holding. Then, without a word, I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed in the air. Seems like your mouth isn't hungry. Huh, since you've got so much to say. I guess you don't need these ration tickets anymore. I paused, letting the words sink in. What a shame. I was actually planning to lend you some. At the mention of the ration tickets, Robert froze, his anger replaced by a stunned silence. No matter how educated a person is, anger can strip away reason. I dusted off my hands, picked up my things, and turned to leave. In truth, I had never intended to lend him the tickets. That was just something I said to drive the point home. Sure enough, I hadn't walked far before I heard the rustling of leaves behind me. I could almost picture him standing there, seething with impotent rage. A few days later, while heading back from the fields with my parents to prepare lunch, I spotted Robert and his dear Emily on a small path outside the village, hiding behind some bushes. I quietly observed them. It seemed my scolding had finally gotten through to him. Robert had swapped his scholarly robe for simple, practical clothing. Beside him was a young girl with 2 braided pigtails. What a pair they made. That was Emily Carter. In my previous life, she was the one Robert Johnson would give his last ration tickets to, even if it meant his entire family would starve. Back then, I naively believed that as long as I treated him with genuine care, I could eventually win his heart and bring him back to our family. But I was wrong. His white moonlight had always held his heart, unwavering until death. I was nothing more than a live-in mate to him, someone to manage his household and bear the burdens. When I finally passed away, he wasted no time bringing Emily into his life, marrying her with complete disregard for his reputation as a respected professor. To give credit where it's due, though, Emily did have a certain charm. No wonder even at 80, she could still make an educated man like Robert utterly devoted to her. Robert, didn't you promise to bring me some rice and flour last time? Emily's sweet, soft voice wrapped around him like silk. Her delicate hands, pale and slender, lightly tugged at his sleeve, swaying gently as she spoke. Even I, another woman, couldn't help but feel my heart soften at the sight. I didn't expect Nathan to go back on his word. Robert stammered, his voice carrying a hint of helplessness. He told me he'd lend it, but now he won't admit it when I ask him again. So, this is how Robert talked to Emily in private. It was surprisingly effective, displaying his vulnerability to evoke pity, then showing resilience to gain admiration. A handsome man using this combination could easily win someone over. A sophisticated hunter often appears in the guise of prey. This tactic had worked exceptionally well on me in my past life. But with Emily, it didn't seem to be working as smoothly. I noticed her lips twitch slightly, her eyes briefly flashing with impatience before quickly reverting to a composed demeanor. With these two, it's hard to tell who's the hunter and who's the prey. But what can I do? Emily sighed, her tone fragile. I've been feeling dizzy lately, and my mother is waiting for me to bring food back. But it's fine. Robert, don't worry about me. I'll find a way myself. Her feigned strength clearly struck a chord with Robert. He pulled her into his arms, gently comforting her. Don't worry. You're my heart and soul. I won't let you go hungry. But didn't Nathan refuse to lend you the tickets? What are you going to do? Steal them? Emily asked, her voice soft but pointed. I know she's already interested in me, Robert said confidently. She's just being coy about it for now. It was as if he had made up his mind. Don't worry, he said, determination flickering in his eyes. I'll get you the ration tickets. Emily's expression immediately brightened. The irritation she'd shown earlier softened into a smile. I'll wait for you, Robert. Before they parted, he kissed her forehead tenderly, as if sealing a promise. The two lingered for a moment before reluctantly going their separate ways. What a touching scene of mutual affection. But I couldn't help noticing that Robert headed straight in the direction of my family's fields. In my previous life, barely a month after my death, Robert held a grand wedding for Emily. The spectacle was so extravagant it felt like my dignity had been ground into the dirt. Even lying in my grave, I could sense how opulent it was. In contrast, during the decades I spent as his wife, I had never experienced even the smallest semblance of romance or ceremony. Not once. When I married into the Johnson family, I worked tirelessly, serving his grandparents, caring for his parents, and raising our children. During difficult times, Robert claimed he needed to focus on his studies, leaving me to manage the household alone. For the sake of his education, I scavenged garbage, sold scraps, and fed pigs with leftover scraps just to keep our family afloat. When his studies finally bore fruit, I stood by his side, helping him establish his private school. The hardships I endured during that time were beyond words. In the end, even after I died, I became nothing more than a bitter footnote in Robert's life. He dismissed me as an unfortunate burden during his remarriage in old age, conveniently rewriting our history as one where he suffered because of me. It's true what they say. History is written by the victors. I let out a deep breath, straightened my back, and quickened my pace. I had to get home, prepare lunch, and return to the fields quickly. There was no way I'd let Robert Johnson win over my parents with his pathetic attempts at ingratiation. Robert, you owe me a lifetime's worth of debts, and this time, you're going to repay every last one. When I returned to the fields with lunch, sure enough, there was an extra shadow at the edge of the field. Lunch is ready, I called. All three heads turned toward me simultaneously. Lila, look who's here, my father said cheerfully, completely unaware of the tangled history between Robert and me. He waved Robert over enthusiastically, introducing us as if we didn't already know each other. Lila, you're back. And Robert's here, too, he said, as if it were a pleasant coincidence. Robert stood there with an earnest, humble expression, so that's what he was aiming for. He must have thought I'd be fooled by his facade of sincerity, but what he didn't notice was the way my parents' faces subtly changed when they heard him call me Lila. Isn't he the guy from the neighboring village? My mother asked, frowning slightly. The one who always stays at home, burying his head in books. Lila, don't be rude, my father chided. His name is Robert, and he's 2 years older than you. He's just passing by and saw us still working at midday, so he came to help. Such a kind young man. I let out a hollow laugh. Passing by to help? Or deliberately coming to put on a show? Robert's expression faltered, but my father ignored my tone and continued. You want to study, right? Robert has experience with that. You should learn from him. Experience? Sure, I said dryly, not even bothering to lift my head. He's 22 and still hasn't passed his exams. My mother nudged me sharply with her elbow. This child speaks her mind too bluntly. Robert, don't take it to heart. Come, let's eat. I fixed my gaze on Robert, my eyes narrowing slightly. This was the lunch I made for my parents. If Robert dared to take even a single bite, I swore I'd make him regret it. No, ma'am, Robert said quickly. I wouldn't dare take such precious food from you. You all eat. I'll be fine. He hesitated, then added with a hint of self-pity. If only my family had food to share. I'd invite you over for a meal at our place. It was so obvious. He was here to gain sympathy from my parents and make them feel sorry for him. He probably wanted them to lend him ration tickets. Over my dead body. Such a shame. I interjected, pretending to lament. We did have some extra tickets, but I got scared by a dog on my way to class the other day and dropped them. Otherwise, I'd have gladly lent you some. At the mention of ration tickets, Robert's expression stiffened, and he swallowed nervously. I could tell he was remembering the slap I gave him last time. It's fine, Lila, he said, his voice tight. We'll manage. Don't waste your tickets on me. Sir, ma'am, please go ahead and eat. I'll just head over there to finish turning the soil. Oh, don't go, Robert, my father said, trying to stop him. Take a break and sit down. Before my parents could get up, I pressed them back into their seats. You two eat. He's probably just shy around you. I'll take him some food myself. Carrying a bowl of food, I walked over to where Robert was standing, making sure to pass behind him so he couldn't avoid hearing my sarcastic tone. Working hard. Huh. He paused for a moment but didn't turn around. His pretense of modesty and diligence was so infuriating it made my blood boil. Who are you trying to fool? Robert, I said, my voice laced with disdain. Do you think I can't see right through your little act? In my previous life, Robert had grown used to my meekness and obedience. He couldn't handle this new version of me, someone who mocked and challenged him. I saw his grip on the hoe tighten until his knuckles turned white. Finally, he turned to me with a forced smile. Lila, what are you talking about? You know I care about you. Isn't that why I'm here? Trying to win over your parents so I can marry you. The audacity. If I hadn't lived through my past life, I might have fallen for this act again. But now, his innocent expression only made me feel sick to my stomach. I couldn't hold it back. I actually gagged. Robert's face darkened instantly. What's that supposed to mean? If you're not happy, just say so. There's no need to humiliate me like this. Ah, there he was. The same Robert Johnson I knew from my previous life. That man who used to scowl at me in disdain. Who couldn't tolerate even the slightest hint of disrespect from me. Did he really think we were close? In the past, I had been blind to follow him. I watched as Robert Johnson's expression shifted from embarrassment to disbelief. What do you mean? He stammered. You, someone who's been a professor, can't even string a proper sentence together? People found out. Wouldn't they laugh their heads off? In that moment, Robert realized the truth. I, like him, had been reborn. His pretense dropped, and he sneered at me. So, you've been given another chance, too. In that case, I don't need to explain anything to you. You're going to hand over your ration tickets, and you're going to give up that spot to study. Otherwise, don't blame me for forgetting the bond we had as husband and wife in our past life. I couldn't help but laugh. In our previous life, he had treated me so cruelly, yet now he believed I should obediently give him whatever he wanted. I stared at him coldly. You should go home and take your medicine if you're this delusional. Stop lying to yourself. Without me in our past life, you'd have starved to death long ago. What makes you think that after seeing your heartlessness, I'd ever listen to you again? We parted on bad terms. As I watched him walk away, all I could think was how much further I wished he would go. After several humiliating encounters with me, Robert kept his distance for a while. I had no interest in keeping tabs on him. Instead, I focused on my studies. Mr. Su was an excellent teacher, and I thrived under his guidance, often receiving his praise. Meanwhile, the famine across the country was gradually easing, and many families in our village had begun harvesting crops. Without Robert in my life, things were looking up for me. Occasionally, I heard bits of gossip from classmates about Robert and Emily Carter. Things like how Robert had been helping Emily's family with their chores, or how he had gone out late at night to escort her home from her cleaning job, or how he had given her family some of his own scarce food. Sometimes, it was about how he got into a fight with the village chief's son over her. In my past life, Robert had complained about the smallest favors I did for him, like bringing him lunch. Yet here he was, going to such lengths for Emily. True love really was invincible. By now, I'd become completely indifferent to anything involving Robert and Emily. Even people around me could see that Emily didn't genuinely care for him, but Robert was too blinded by his feelings to notice. His family had no means to send him to school. His two older brothers were lazy and gluttonous, and Robert himself didn't even know how to grow crops properly. With no food, no education, and no prospects, the only thing he had left was Emily, who made him feel like he still had some value. Of course, he clung to her tightly. Let them do as they pleased. I wanted nothing to do with him anymore. One day, the village gathered all the young people for a meeting. I took a shortcut through a small path behind the village chief's house. As I passed the backyard, I saw Robert standing at the door. His entire demeanor was dark and brooding, his chest rising and falling sharply as he breathed. Was he here to fight the chief's son again? From behind the wooden door, I heard voices, Emily's and the village chief's son. Have you made up your mind? The man's voice came through clearly. What are you saying? Eric, Emily's voice sounded soft and sweet. My heart has always been with you. Then why were you always so close to Robert? Eric asked suspiciously. It was him. He wouldn't stop pestering me, Emily said, her voice growing more aggrieved. He said that out of all the girls in the village, I was the only one he liked. He kept trying to get close to me, but it was all talk. He never followed through on anything. As Emily spoke, her tone became more and more pitiful. The one I've always liked is you, but I was afraid he'd cause trouble for you. I'm just a weak girl. I didn't dare reject his advances. I was scared he'd lash out in anger. A faint sound of sniffles followed. This is a society governed by law now, Eric said confidently, and I'm the village chief's son. Don't worry. As long as I'm here, no one will wrong you. He won't dare lay a finger on you. Thank you, Eric, Emily said softly. I heard your mom came back late from town recently. How about I visit your house at dusk today? Behind the wooden door, the two were openly exchanging sweet words in broad daylight. While outside, Robert Johnson's fists clenched tighter and tighter. I could almost see the veins popping on his forehead, the color there turning green like the lotus leaf he once carried. I should have realized sooner that someone who could step into another person's life immediately after their spouse's death wasn't exactly pure-hearted. In my past life, while I was still alive, Emily Carter had already become Robert's mistress. This time, seeing that Robert hadn't risen to prominence yet, she turned her attention to Eric, the village chief's son. And now, even before they were formally engaged, she was already arranging to visit him after dark. Anyone with eyes could guess what they were planning. The memory of my wedding night with Robert suddenly resurfaced. On that night, Emily, supposedly unable to hold her liquor, got drunk and stayed at our house. Robert, using the excuse that he was a light sleeper and didn't want to disturb me, made arrangements for her to rest in the guest room. In the middle of the night, I heard faint sobbing coming from outside. Without hesitation, Robert got up and went to her, spending the entire night by her side. A man and a woman, alone, in the dark, one drunk. What could anyone think had happened? No wonder. After my death, Robert had the audacity to declare at my grave that Emily had long been his woman. Turns out, it had started far earlier than I had imagined. But it's fine. The wicked always get what they deserve. Robert must have never thought the day would come when the woman he had adored his entire life, his perfect white moonlight, would show her true colors. She wasn't uninterested in others. She just didn't waste her time on those she deemed useless. Now, without me, Robert was nothing. This was the karma he deserved, and I hoped he savored every bit of it. The village chief called a meeting to announce a new government policy encouraging education for all. Somehow, he managed to convince Mr. Su to expand his teaching efforts and open the village's first school. They brought in more teachers to accommodate everyone who wanted to study. Robert, lucky as ever, got a spot, but it didn't matter. I was curious to see if, in this life, he could manage to get into a prestigious school again. The days passed. Robert buried himself in his studies, but it didn't seem to do much good. His practice test scores were mediocre at best. So, this is the great professor? Seems like your brilliance has its limits. Robert. Still, I didn't let my guard down. Robert wasn't completely without skill, and I had to work harder to stay ahead. The national exams arrived quickly. Walking out of the examination hall after finishing, I felt the warmth of the sun on my face and the vibrant energy of the world around me. In my 2 lives, I had never appreciated the world as much as I did at that moment. Outside the exam hall, my parents were waiting for me. My father held a half-melted popsicle in his hand and waved as soon as he saw me. Happiness took on a tangible form in that instant. The bright afternoon sun, the loving faces of my parents, the refreshing taste of the popsicle. It was simple, yet so perfect. I thought to myself, this time, my life will be different. It will be good. When I received my acceptance letter, my nose tingled, and tears welled up in my eyes. So, this is what it feels like. My life can be this wonderful, so full of hope and love. Why are you crying, silly child? This is a good thing, my mother said, her hands trembling as she wiped my tears. Her voice wavered as though she, too, was on the verge of tears. In my past life, by this time, My parents' health had already deteriorated, while Robert was taking his first steps toward becoming a professor. After his success, he never once thought to thank my parents for their sacrifices. He didn't even bother to attend their funerals, claiming he was too busy teaching. Looking back now, everything felt so clear. He was the kind of person who had been harboring resentment toward my family for a long time. People don't just suddenly become rotten overnight. I had just been too blind to notice before. In my previous life, I had been far too naive as a wife. By the later years, I had grown numb, convincing myself to endure again and again, just to get by. But now, having freed myself from this toxic man, my vibrant life was only just beginning. My parents and elderly relative were still with me, and for that, I was deeply content. After the new semester began, I balanced my studies with part-time work to support myself. I even managed to buy a telephone for my family, so I could call them from public phones and check on them whenever I wanted. I heard that Robert Johnson failed his exams twice. I heard that Emily Carter married Eric. I heard that Eric, while driving a tractor to town, had a terrible accident involving a large boulder rolling down a hill and didn't survive. I heard that the stock of food in my family's granary grew steadily, and we even had enough surplus to sell. Life had finally become peaceful. Even the little dog we'd recently adopted had grown plump and healthy. The next time I saw Robert was when I graduated from college. By then, he had lost the arrogance he once flaunted after his rebirth. Instead, there was a steady demeanor about him, tinged with a weariness that wasn't there in our previous lives. He had managed to get into a vocational school, and eventually became a teacher at the affiliated elementary school of the university I had attended. That was quite an achievement for someone who relied entirely on his own efforts to pass the exams. In this era, being a vocational school graduate was already an impressive accomplishment, though he was a year or two older than most of his peers. "It's been a while," he said. I smiled faintly. Better if it had been forever. Robert seemed taken aback by my curt response, his hand retreating awkwardly. "You've changed over the years. You're not like you used to be." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my tone indifferent. "Only people who aren't doing well dwell on the past. Aren't you doing fine now, Professor Johnson?" His expression wavered for a moment before he attempted to feign nonchalance. "Since we're old acquaintances, why don't you introduce me to some of your contacts?" This man had truly mastered the art of shamelessness. Even after all these years, he hadn't changed a bit. I snorted coldly. "Professor Johnson, you must still be dreaming. If you want introductions, try squeezing in with the homeless man outside. Maybe you'll dream up something better after a nap." I pushed past his shoulder and walked away. "Lila Rivers, don't go too far," he snarled, his voice trembling with rage. "I've seen plenty of women like you. Playing hard to get might work once or twice, but I don't have the patience for more than that." I paused mid-step, turning to face him. His teeth were clenched so tightly I was half convinced they'd shatter. I tapped my ear as if to confirm I hadn't misheard him, my expression calm and emotionless. Then I stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. Looking at his smug, self-satisfied face, I couldn't help but smirk. Did he really think he could control me? Without a word, I brought my knee up sharply, slamming it into him. "What are you doing? You crazy woman? I'll call security," he shrieked. Before he could make good on his threat, I waved a guard over. After a few words from me, the guard promptly dragged Robert away. From behind the gates of the school, I watched him being thrown out. My gaze was cold and indifferent. He got what he deserved. Just as I turned to leave, I heard a familiar female voice rounding the corner. Out of curiosity, I glanced back and saw Emily Carter rushing over to help Robert up from the ground, her expression full of concern. I raised an eyebrow. So, these two were back together again. Hadn't Emily married Eric? Now, Emily was dressed provocatively, her confidence seemingly heightened by years of being around Robert. The way she clung to him, whispering softly, made it clear she had no intention of leaving his side. That woman didn't even bother to hide the sharp edge in her voice anymore. "Without any work experience, you must have climbed into some leader's bed to get here," Emily sneered. I glanced at her dismissively. "Is it really that hard to get in here?" Then, shifting my gaze to Robert Johnson, I added, Just like back when we took the national exams. Was it really that hard to get into college? My words seemed to hit a nerve. Back then, I had passed the entrance exam on my first attempt, while it had taken him 3 or 4 tries just to get into a vocational school. Emily opened her mouth to say more, but Robert quickly stopped her. "Don't mind her bluntness," he said, his tone forced. Then, with a smug air, he added, "After proctoring these exams, I'll be working at the local Department of Education. You'd better hope you don't end up under my supervision." I didn't respond. Brushing past them, I walked away without looking back. After the exams, there were no rumors of Robert securing a job at the Department of Education. Instead, the news broke about a teacher at our school who had helped a leader's child cheat on the college entrance exams. The incident caused a huge scandal. The higher-ups were furious and ordered a thorough investigation. It wasn't long before more dirt surfaced, exposing bribery and corruption involving the teacher's spouse. Both were arrested and detained. When I went to the detention center to check on the situation, I saw Robert. He had lost a considerable amount of weight, his face gaunt and hollow. The moment he saw me, he lunged forward, slamming into the glass divider. If it hadn't been there, I was sure he would have clawed at my face. "It was you," he shouted, his voice shaking with rage. "You're the one who reported me, aren't you?" I stared at him, unimpressed. "Professor Johnson, you really give me too much credit. You're not worth that much effort." Robert glared at me, his expression twisted with anger and desperation. "Ever since the famine, I've been on the back foot. You knew my family was struggling, yet you refused to lend me ration tickets. Even when I helped at your house, you humiliated me. You took away my spot to study. I had nothing left. Emily was forced to marry Eric out of desperation. We suffered while you thrived. And now, when I finally had something, a chance at a position in the Department of Education, it's gone. This news was only shared with you. If it wasn't you, then who else? I was so close to becoming a professor, to rising to success." The more he spoke, the more agitated he became. For the first time since his rebirth, I saw him completely lose control. "Robert," I said calmly, "none of those things were ever yours to begin with. The ration tickets were my family's. Lending them to you would have been a kindness, but refusing was entirely my right. Why would I lend them to you? Just so you could use them to court your mistress? It's laughable." I continued, my tone unwavering. "And have you forgotten how you got your study spot in the first place? My parents used our family savings to secure it for you. How dare you claim it was yours? And now, isn't Emily still by your side? She was there on our wedding night. She was there when you flaunted her at the hospital after my death. And she's here now. Why not let her keep you company in this cell? Isn't it perfect? Just the two of you, with no one to disturb you." With every word I spoke, Robert's face grew darker. Perhaps my calm, smiling demeanor made him think I was still the pushover from our past life. His tone abruptly shifted, taking on a pleading edge. "Lila, please, you're so capable now. Help me. It'd be nothing for you to lend a hand. Think of the bond we shared as husband and wife in our past life." I raised an eyebrow, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "The bond we shared? Where was that bond when your family couldn't repay the ration tickets and decided to marry me as compensation? Where was it when you gave half those tickets to Emily while I was left to starve and endure your family's scolding? Where was it when you claimed your studies were too hard and demanded I sacrifice everything for you?" His face twisted further. But I wasn't finished. "Emily is still with you, isn't she? She was with you then. And she's here now. Let her continue to keep you company. Just the two of you, without anyone else interfering. Isn't that ideal?" Robert's face was a storm of emotions. Rage, desperation, and helplessness. But I didn't waver. I stood up and walked away, leaving him to stew in the mess he had created. "My family exhausted our savings to support your education. It drained my parents' health and ultimately took them from me. While you studied, I was at home feeding pigs, scavenging trash, and selling scraps just to provide food and drink for your family. Yet, in the end, I became the scapegoat, the one you blamed for keeping you and Emily apart for 60 years. A lifetime is so long. Robert Johnson, did you ever, for even a single moment, think of the bond we shared as husband and wife? After a prolonged silence, he finally spoke, his tone filled with disdain. That was because you were incompetent. You were nothing compared to Emily. She made me feel like a real man in our relationship. She's gentle and understanding, far better than you could ever be. She needed me, and I felt like someone with purpose when I was with her. You were useless in our past life, and now you're just cruel. Don't think you can take me away from her. He was beyond saving. Whatever nonsense Emily had fed him, he'd swallowed it whole. Looking at him for even a moment longer felt like it sullied my eyes. You really think I care about you? I said coldly. Stay here by yourself. Then, everything you're going through now is what you owe me. It's only fair you pay it back. Goodbye forever, Professor Johnson. I smiled faintly and hung up the phone. Through the glass, I saw his panic as realization set in. Lila. No, wait. I was wrong. Help me. Please help me. Let's start over. I'll treat you better this time. The moment I hung up the phone, the world went silent. I didn't look at him again. Turning gracefully, I walked out of the detention center. The air outside felt so much fresher than the oppressive atmosphere inside. I made my way to the driver's seat of my new car, started the engine, and headed home to bring my parents to live with me in my new house. The scenery outside the window blurred as it sped by, bathed in sunlight. I drove forward, leaving the past far behind.